I think I get the award for the longest title in the program for any of the sessions, but I promise my talk will not be as long as that. So today, and I want to say thank you very much. This is very exciting to be here as a librarian and a digital curator, and have the libraries represented. And someone last night, I know, asked me, are you a museum person or a librarian person? I have no idea. I'm both. I don't know. Maybe neither. Who knows? So anyway, this is my talk. Every book tells a story, but what can 68,000 tell you? And I'll start off with kind of describing the British Library, because you can never assume anyone knows who we are, even though we're quite big. So the British Library is located in London, and it's the National Library of the UK. It used to be part of the British Museum, and it outgrew those digs around 1973, I think, and became, by law, the National Library, and moved into its own space by St. Pancras International Station. So you should come by if you ever come to London. It's a beautiful building. And the collections are enormous, and we love to say that we have 150 million items, and we'll go back to that a little later. So the items that we have are a huge range. They come from the British Museum collections, of course, but also by law, every publisher has to deposit anything that's published in the UK and Ireland with the British Library for preservation purposes. So that's a lot of stuff that comes in all the time, and it doesn't stop. And so that's a huge collection. And then this year, in April 2013, they changed the law to include digital items as well. So that means e-journals, e-books. And we thought we'd start with the easy stuff, which is just capture the entire UK web domain a couple times a year. So you can imagine that our collections are, they range from the Diamond Sutra that is from 868, which is the earliest surviving printed book, to web sites and blogs in the UK Web Archive from, just a blog from 2011. And I just did a quick search before I did the presentation, and this is just an interview I thought was kind of funny. If you know the Beat Poets, and it was an interview they did with someone who was a friend of Jack Kerouac, and they said he liked to annoy everybody because when they'd sit around, he loved to read the Diamond Sutra aloud, and all they wanted to do is smoke marijuana. So, you get that kind of interesting stuff. So back to the 150 million items, that makes a lot of sense in a world of physical objects, but it gets increasingly difficult when we try and quantify that in the digital world. Where do you stop? And I think so whenever we have a meeting, we all kind of laugh about the 150 million item number, because it really just is starting to lose its impact. It doesn't make sense. We might as well just say we have a gazillion things. So there's a subtle shift underway in how we perceive collections. So when we talk about collections, especially books, so I can focus a little bit on books, digital breaks down previously bound items into fundamental bits of data. And that data can be recombined, it can be duplicated, it can be shared, it can be linked in infinite ways to create a narrative or inroads. And there's a new breed of researcher that is knocking on our door at the British Library, and we have to react to that. And these are the guys who want to come in. They don't want to just see an object. They don't want to see just one book or one digitized manuscript is not enough. They want to see all of them from centuries, and they want to run their own tools over these and ask their own questions, come up with their own answers and their own narratives, and they don't really care what we think as curators about, the history of this object and that sort of thing. So that is a little shocking to us, but it's exciting, and so there's lots of opportunities for all of us. And so this is one of my favorite quotes by this guy, Franco Moretti, and he said it quite a few years ago, and it was quite controversial in academia. He's a literary scholar from Stanford, and he said, reading individual works is as irrelevant as describing the architecture of a building from a single brick or the layout of a city from a single church. So being a librarian, that's difficult. You're like, Don't you just want to read the books? But they don't, some people. And so these scholars are viewing the archive, our holdings, our collections, as an infinite pool of multiple layers of loosely held data. So we're moving beyond, well, some people are moving beyond just resource discovery, putting one object in front of one person. And I love the title of this conference because the only way to do that is to go beyond control. There's no other way when you're doing large-scale analysis on multiple objects. So the library has been quite forward-thinking, I think, in creating two entities of the library. So we just started, it's called British Library Labs, experiment with our digital collections, and then there's the digital curator team, of which I'm a part of. BL Labs is trying to get people to take a fresh look at our collections and reposition our collections as data which can be used at scale. And so these guys, and in partnership with us digital curators, we're trying to find data sets and new digital collections in places that you wouldn't have suspected. So a really good example is our catalog records. So we have the BNB, it's called the British National Bibliography, and some of you may be familiar with it. But it's basically catalog information for everything that's published in the UK since 1954. So other libraries use this information to describe their objects in their catalogs, and it makes up our catalog to find objects. Well, recently we turned that into linked data because people want to do analysis across all of those records to do things, to try and discover things like what does the history, how does the history of publishing reflect changes in copyright law, say? So we've changed legislation one way or another. Are people publishing different books because of that? Or what are the trends of what people are publishing? And that's just one of a couple research projects using that kind of data. There's also the more interesting stuff of book ordering data. So, we think of our digital collections at the library are digitized manuscripts, but actually there's a huge chunk of people who want to know what are the activities of the library and how of a national library, what is the research being done there, what are the books that people are taking out, and what information is that telling us about society and people. So people are data hungry, and we're finding this in all different places of the library, in nooks and crannies. So the BL Labs project, if you have a chance to look it up, holds competitions, and in the background is sourcing data from all these different places around the library and trying to see digitized collections as huge data sets. And then one of the big things that the digital curator team does at the British Library, my colleague, I think, put it really well. He said, we're trying to teach the other curators in the library and librarians that the library is becoming a place full of data as much as it is a place full of physical stuff. And there's a growing community of users who see it that way. So last November, we launched a bespoke training program for 300 curators in the library. And we're teaching them things like just the basics of the web, to what an API is, to how do I run a crowdsourcing project to get more metadata, and what is linked data. And there's 15 courses, and we built those by talking to the researchers who are actually doing that kind of work. And so one course is about data visualization for scholarly analysis. So we have curators understanding how people are trying to access that catalog data en masse and do that type of research. And it's interesting to have that kind of community building with the researchers who are actually doing it. So they're teaching the course, but they're always saying, your data is terrible. You need to clean it up, because it's all this old data that is not, is very deconstructed and sometimes not very good. So it helps inform us for the future that we have to keep an eye on when we produce things, when we digitize things, what does the data behind it look like? Will it be useful for people in the future? So that's been really interesting. I can tell people more about that after. So we have a lot of projects on the go, and I wish I could tell you all about all of them. But I decided to pick just one. It's not even a project. It was a very small activity that we just did recently, because I think it really kind of highlights what the change is underfoot at the British Library. So the mechanical curator, so we digitized 68,000 titles from the collection a few years back, and that was through Microsoft, and we're always doing mass digitization. And people are always asking me, oh, are you selecting things? And in mass digitization, you say, take that whole side of the building and just digitize it. And a lot of that stuff, it's from 17th, 19th century. The metadata is terrible. We don't even know really enough about those books that we're even digitizing, but we'll do whatever we can to get them digitized. So in the traditional way of this kind of new order of having digital collections, we've distributed them on different platforms. So you can download the iPad app, the historical books app from the library, and they are linked to from our catalog, that sort of thing. But what we also got out of that digitization was 22 million page images, all of which have full text with them. All of that full text has data, place names. I mean, it's a rich, rich resource of how people were documenting those times between 17th and 19th. It's also completely random and sometimes insulting, as we may see later. But so we decided to look at that collection and see it as data set, a gigantic data set, and what can we do with it? So we have one of the guys from the BL Labs is a developer, and he very simply did an algorithm which would take the images out of all of those page images. And so that has been churning away, and he loaded it so it would just show up a random image from one of the books with a link back to the catalog. But that was it from those 19th century books. And I have it sort of set up on here. Oh, did it go away? Gone away. Oh, well, I'll show you after anyway. So the collection is insane, and it's surprising every time it comes out. And we had many issues where we were thinking about it. There's no curation, and this is spitting out random images from 19th century books, and there are a million images, it turns out, in these books. And the images are, it could be as little as a letter, or it could be a huge plate, or it could be even if someone had drawn something or an annotation, and the scanning stuff thought it was a drawing. So it's very interesting for us, and it gives us a visual entry into those data sets ourselves. But it gives us a lot of, so the other thing that happened was once we put it up, we were reaching new audiences very quickly. People who cared about, popular science all of a sudden were interested in, 16th century books from the British Library. And we're building a community of developers who want to see it as data and see it as an interesting collection. But there's lots and lots of questions that were raised in our own team about what this means. It's very different from how we would normally think of being a British Library curator. We're not giving any narrative. We're spitting it out. We're not making any judgments about what is coming. And what is if we have materials that are in there that are racist, and here, does it look like the British Library is spewing racist things or inappropriate content or, I don't know, child abuse? This was one of the images that came out of one of the books, don't suck your thumbs, people. This could happen to you. And so what is it? So it's like we're relinquishing all control over this collection. Is this collection even ours? What are we doing with it? So, but what we had, I hear a ching, so I'm probably going. So anyway, to finalize what I'm trying to say, what can 68,000 books tell us? For researchers, that answer is infinity. It depends on how many researchers, any inroads they make into all the data that is contained with those books. And by the way, this is only 5,000 books in this picture. So if you can imagine 68,000 books. So for us, I guess in conclusion, it has told us that viewing our collections as data and facilitating access to them at scale, breaking the bounds, is breathing new life into historical collections and actually the curatorial profession. So going a bit beyond, giving up a bit of the control of the narrative can be quite inspiring. So.